So here's the rent roll for the shopping center, and it's a shopping center that was for sale in the Mid Florida market. And as you can see, there are 12 spaces here that could be occupied by businesses, right? I simplified a lot of this information, and I took out some privacy things for natural reasons in order to talk about it. But here's how we came to that conclusion. So when you look at this rent roll, what you do is, or what we did was that first of all, you look at the tenant roll, and the tenant spaces here have. The first thing you do is that you look at the spaces available, right? So there's 12 spaces at the property. Right away, 11 are filled, one is vacant. I then moved and I saw that each space was roughly, call it 1,000, maybe 2,000 square feet, right? On the high side, the biggest small space we've got is 2,200 square feet, and everything else is, 805, 840, plus minus 1,500. And when we're looking at it, what you want to do is identify to see the commonalities of each space, right? So everything here is roughly, call it 1,500 plus minus square feet. But then you've got this big one here that's 8,800 square feet. That's a very big space. That's a very big space, taking up almost 40% of the shopping center. And looking at the rent, I'm going to skip this part here. Right? This part's important, but it's not really that important at the moment. Look at this here. This is rent per square foot. Okay, so these are called triple net rents, right? So, or let's just call it the triple net rate. So for the triple net rate, you've got spaces that are in the low $20 range, and then you've got spaces that are kind of in the, call it the high teens. You've got this one space here for 25 bucks a foot. This one, I'll point this out as the one that's a little abnormal. This one at $25 a foot. The reality behind this one was that this space was vacant upon closing as well, but the seller did what's called they didn't technically, I was going to say seller leaseback, but it was not really a seller leaseback. The seller just said, hey, we thought we had a tenant here, but we don't. So we're just going to give you this money here, the $37,600. And with that, you'll go ahead and buy the building. And now, Mr. Buyer, you've got your initial 12 months of income, and the buyer's happy, right? That's a good deal for the buyer and a good deal for the seller too. Probably a little bit of a better deal for the seller, because the seller's return on that is at a 6% cap rate. They got a 16x on their money, right? They were willing to give the buyer the $37,600, but then they were able to get a 16x on it because that increased their value by $600,000. The buyer, of course, wants this as a price reduction, but going into the deal, we already knew that this space was going to generate income. Therefore, this deduction here wasn't really on the table. But let's just say, in a perfect world for the buyer, if this space was vacant, they would have loved to have taken it vacant, but then they would have loved to also take this off of the price. So moving on, this particular property, when it actually sold, it was actually vacant too. This space here is vacant, so we're gonna put a 0 here, okay? At $265,000, it sold at a 6 cap. At a 6 cap, or it sold at roughly a 6 cap. So let's call it $4.4 million. Now, when we were presented with this opportunity, this was more or less what the rent roll looked like. Okay, it showed that the price was 4.4 at a 6 cap, and that the space here was vacant, and this space here was occupied with a tenant. Now, at a 6% cap rate, here's what you have to ask yourself. At a 6% cap rate that they were asking, was this price based on the actual income, or was this price based on this property being completely full, including this 40% vacancy, right? Or 38%, if you want to be very specific. In this particular case, the 6% cap rate and this price was based on actual income, which is very important, because if the seller was, and I see this all the time, this is why a lot of deals sit when there's vacancies. Sit meaning that they don't sell. A seller will put a property up for sale, and again, remember, this is looking at it from the eyes of an investor. Okay, a buyer will, a seller will put a property up for sale, and they will go ahead and say, oh, well, this property is, this property could possibly lease for $12 a foot, and if it could rent for $12 a foot, I'm going to add this income of extra $100,000 a year, and my price is going to be a little over $6 million, or in this case, about 6.2. That's what the seller would ask for this space. Now, at this moment, I'm sharing this information and I'm making this video based on the eyes of an investor. If I was on the seller side and I was listing the property for sale, I would take a very different approach. But as an investor, if this property is vacant, I'm going to go ahead and count this as zero income. And if the income is zero, I don't want that to affect the value. So in this case, Mr. Seller, I'll buy for the $4.4 million. But this 38% here, I'm going to have to go through the work of filling it up. You're selling it to me vacant, so I'm going to pay you this price. And that's actually what happened. Okay. Now, when looking at it, how do you determine what will it be worth after we fill up this space? Okay. Number one is that you have to know what you not know, but you want to have a really, really good guess as to what you can rent this for. What is your hypothesis? What do you think that you could rent this space for? Now, looking at the other spaces, right? You see these four up top at $20 a foot, or 2024. This year's in the 800s. This one's 17. This one's 2200. These here are renting for $20 pretty easily in the 20s. But something about this here that you won't know because you didn't see a picture of this building is that these four spaces here more or less face the busier side of the center. This was a shopping center that was an L shape, and a part of the L was facing a very busy road, call it 50,000 cars a day. But then the spaces over here are faced faced a smaller road at roughly, call it 20,000 cars a day. So half the traffic, right? So normally when it's half the traffic, it's going to be a lower rate because the businesses normally like to be exposed to a lot more traffic. If I was a landlord or if I was a leasing broker on this, what I would have done was threw in more TI and more free rent in order to pump these rates up to the $20 level, because clearly the market can support $20. It's just that without the exposure that these are having up here, tenants were probably beating them up a little bit. In a perfect world, you could buy the rate, right? As the owner, investor, as a landlord, you could buy the rate. Say, hey, tenant, come in here. I'll give you X amount of free rent, X amount of TI. Go ahead and lease the space for $20, and here's the package that I'm willing to offer you. Knowing that the end goal was to sell the property, that would have been an approach that I would have taken. Now, moving on, how do you determine what rate this may be, right? So at this 8,800 square foot level, you're not going to get the same rates as you are up here. You simply can't, because the smaller spaces will rent for more, and the larger spaces will rent for less. So at 800 square feet, what is your best guess? I looked at comps and everything else, and what I concluded was that, hey, it could rent for roughly $11-12 a foot. So when you pop in $12 there, the annual income there, and when we say annual rent, remember, this is the annual triple net rent, okay? Annual triple net rent. This is your base rate. This does not include CAM. So this is money in your pocket as the owner, and you would then use this money to pay your debt service, and then you've got your cash flow, right? Your positive cash flow after that. Hopefully positive. It will be positive. If it wasn't positive, I wouldn't be making this video. We wouldn't be talking about it. So at $100,000 extra, you've got your $6.2 million, right? Or 6.196. So check this out. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'll just go ahead and just paste the values there. I'm going to put this back down to 0. The client bought it for 4.4. Once they lease this up for $12 a foot, it'll be worth about 6.2. The difference there is the following, right? 1.7. Okay, so a little over $1.5 million. So it's looking pretty, right? It's looking very good. That's how right away we looked at it. We're like, holy crap! If we go ahead and make this space occupied with a tenant or maybe 3 tenants or 4 tenants, we're going to increase the value of the building $1,700,000. Now, the next question that you should ask, though, or this client asked, and if you're looking at a similar situation, what you should do in order to calculate all this out is, what does it cost to get there, right? So this here is the purchase price. Here is the this is, call it the value add. This is the stabilized price, right? And then down here is you've got your margin. Now, if that's all your margin, I'm always fixing the formatting because it kills me whenever the formatting is off. That's your margin, your profit margin. What is it going to take for us to get to this $1.7 million profit margin, right? You've got free rent, you've got your TI, you've got your OpEx, more or less the CAM that you're going to be paying while the space is vacant, and then you've got your leasing commissions, right? Free rent, let's just say for a space that size, let's go ahead and estimate that it's going to be vacant for a year. Okay, if it's a small space, if it's like 1,000 or 2,000 square feet, few months, 3 months, 4 months, but for a space that big compared to this this actual shopping center. If it was 8,000 square feet, a part of like a 100,000 square foot shopping center, not too big of a deal. But in this case here, for this particular market, 8,800 square feet is a larger center, and it will take a little bit of time to take down. So let's go ahead and estimate 12 months, right? So free rent, 12 months. You've got, remember earlier we said this would rent for $12 a foot, right? So free rent, so you've got your 1 year, right? Free rent of 1 year. TI, let's just say TI, we give them $20 a foot. Okay, $20 a foot in TI, because remember, we're also giving them free rent. OpEx, let's say OpEx is $6 a foot times their space size, which is that. So you got $53,000 there. And for leasing commissions, you've got the annual rent, and this is totally a ballpark and totally an estimate. Okay, times 5 years times 6%. So commission is about $31,000. So far you're in this $368,000. Now, this space here, again, you don't know this because you didn't see pictures of the building. This space here was completely gutted. Okay, so you have to factor in, hey, how much is it going to cost me in order to gut this building? I'm sorry, not gut the building, but how much is it going to cost me to build out this space? And with the particular build out, let's call this build out cost, right? The build out cost is going to be, I know we did an estimate on it, and it's about $100 a foot. Okay, $100 a foot, meaning that $100 a foot times the square footage, $886,000. Now, you could go ahead and formulate it that, hey, you're going to pay for that number, right? The full $886,000. But the reality is that you're not, because this $886,000 was estimated to be a full vanilla shell, built out, ready to go. I could walk in, open up my laptop, sit down at a desk, and I'm ready to go. That is what the $100 per square foot will cost. But the reality is that because you're giving the tenant so much incentive, they are not going to expect for you to pay that full amount. The tenant knows that they're going to pick up that a big portion of that bill, because they're going to want to build it out to themselves too. Imagine if you have like a dental practice that goes in there. They've got all their own dental build out, and they're going to spend a lot of money for that. So in terms of this $886,000, let's just say, as ownership, you're going to go ahead and budget half, right? You're going to budget $443,000. Now, this here was the total, right? The total, this is called the lease up. So if that's the total lease up, and then you've got your build out cost, here's your new number, right? That's your new number. This is the cost in order to get that space full. And then you take out your margin. Remember the margin? You're going to go ahead and take your profit margin, which is zero now. I don't know how that happened. This profit margin, though, I remember it was like 4.4, right? I know, that's not the exact number, but the margin was this. Actually, I should do this here. The margin was about 1.796. So you're not making your $1,796,000. Hey, no big deal. You're still making just under $1 million. And of course, this is all hypothetical, right? You could get into this, and so many different things can go so many different ways. However, this is a very, very specific, educated guess as to what's going to happen once we go ahead and tackle this project. All these numbers were vetted. We had GCs walk through it. Leasing commissions, OpEx, tax insurance, property tax, property insurance. What are TIs going for in the marketplace? What are free rents going on in the marketplace? We already did all that research, and these are numbers that are very real. These are very real numbers and very close to what the market will be. So we were able to look at it and say, hey, based on our market analysis, if you buy this building for the 4.4 and you spend $812,000, you are going to make just under $1 million of value. Now that's assuming a few things. That's assuming that you're only renting it out for $12 a foot. Could you rent it? Is $12 a foot middle, low, or high? I would definitely say it was on the lower side. The reason that we use the lower side is because we want to under-promise, over-deliver, right? You never want to make a spreadsheet look all rosy, and then when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of the deal and you actually buy it and you're executing it, whether you're the investor or maybe you're a broker and sold it to a client, you never wanted the deal to go bad. So you'd rather under-promise, over-deliver, and have it be a success story, right? So we can make YouTube videos on it. Whenever you're able to create a performer like this, it will help you get to the point of really where the meat and potatoes of real estate wealth generation is at. Yeah, you could buy a shopping center that's stabilized and make 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% cash on cash per year, which is great money and it's perfectly fine. That model works. But when you're able to do this and you put in a little bit of work and you go ahead and take a space, take on some risk, calculated risk, and put a tenant in there, you create this value. You're creating the wealth. And once you create this value, guess what? You can take this to the bank and the bank will look at it and say, oh, wow, you went ahead and you did a really good job here. We're going to go ahead and give you a cash out on it. Or maybe you want to flip it. You want to sell it a year from now and take that money and buy a bigger shopping center, a bigger property. There's a lot of different avenues to go about it. So yeah, with this property here, this is how we were able to identify the $1 million value add. And there's a lot of this. There's a lot of properties like this out there. You just really got to dig for it. That's all. There are times where you'll find a property where it might look completely full. This property could be completely full, but let's just say, what if it was only $5 a foot? If it was leased at $5 a foot, but then the lease was month to month, when you look at it right away, hey, this guy's on the market at $5 a foot. I could buy this since he's month to month. I could ask him to either move out or renegotiate with him, bring him up to market at $12 a foot, and boom, what do you got? Almost $1 million of value add. Another scenario is that maybe they're at $5 a foot, and maybe their business is, I don't know, maybe they're using it as an office or something, an office for an industry that's dying, right? We fill in the blank, whatever industry it is. Maybe something that's getting attacked by AI right now, right? What you could do is, but let's just say that not month to month, right? Let's say they got 5 years left, right? Let's say they got 5 years left on their lease. What you could do is go in here and realize that, hey, they're paying $5 a foot. I wonder if I can buy them out of their lease. Go in there and figure out a number where, hey, if they're in there right now, go ahead and offer them $50,000, $100,000, and then create your value add that way. And by the way, if this space was truly leased out and they were just paying a low rent, that would mean you don't need to spend this. You don't have to budget this $443,000 of build out, because the actual construction of the space is already partially built out and it's actually not very bad. It's actually pretty nice, right? So when you've got a tenant in place, that's one of the options you can look at. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go down in order to make a deal work. You just have to be very familiar with how leases work and what options you have, and go from there. A lot of times, people just getting into real estate. For example, there was a guy who called me a few days ago, and he wanted to ask about a sale that I made like a year and a half ago. And I told him, I was like, look, man, I know you want to learn the market, but to ask me about a sale that was a year and a half ago, that data is not really relevant anymore. And he was very nice, so I took a moment. I spoke to him. I said, hey, man, look, why don't you go ahead and figure out what the rental market looks like. Figure out what buildings are leasing for and what they can lease for, because once you have a firm grip on that, you can go ahead and figure out what the valuations are based on cap rates, NOIs, and everything else. But without knowing what properties are leasing for and why, like what we talked about up here, you're going to have a hard time pinpointing what values are. So if you're new to the game, figure out what properties are renting for. Figure out what properties are renting for, why they're renting for that, what free rent packages look like, TI packages look like, what leasing commissions look like in your marketplace. And then with that information, you can then do an analysis just like this one. If you've got questions and whatnot, feel free to write me, and I'm happy to help any way I can. I appreciate you watching, and have a great day.